So I'm recording now. Again, feel free to interrupt if you have any questions or something doesn't make sense. I'm happy to review stuff. So one of the things I like to do with Piskel, if I'm going to draw something, they do have some like shapes. So I just took this circle shape, and what I'm going to do is use this as a kind of guide. And so I'm going to go to the next frame. I'm going to click add a frame. And then I'm going to take this FPS thing down so it's not like going super fast. And then this onion skin button will show me sort of a, transparent image of what's on the previous frame. And so now I can draw, but I have a little guide to use. So I'm going to choose a different color, maybe something like that. And I'm going to do like a little blue sort of guy like this and fill that in. And then I'll take another color, maybe something with a lot of contrast, and give him some eyes. Okay, that looks okay. And then I'm gonna give him some feet. So I'm gonna just draw a couple of feet like that. And you guys do not have to do this part. I'm just kind of gonna go over it for a second. But you probably already started this previously. And let's give him a little frown. Give him some character. He's me last week. Okay, so now I can just go ahead and delete this previous thing, and I have a drawing to work with. And a couple of things I want to point out. So over here, this preview window, see how he's really, really small? That's what he really looks like. So you have a few options here, 1x, 6x, and full. If you do full, you'll see more of the details here, but that's not actually what it's going to look like when you export it onto a file. So you may want to leave this as 1x unless you're like really working on some details, because 1x is what it's going to look like, when we export it, except for the fact that you can make it bigger if you want to. You can change the size when you export. So that's another thing I want to go over. Anyway, so I've got my little guy, and I'm going to add more animations later, but for now I just want a walking animation, and I'm just going to make the simplest possible walking animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate these frames a couple times. So I have my first frame, and I just hit this little duplicate button here. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this leg up here and draw it like slightly like that. Okay. Oh, I did that on the first frame. I did that by mistake, but I can just drag it down here. And it doesn't really matter that much. Okay, then I'm gonna go to this last frame, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna erase the other leg. And obviously, I'm not spending a ton of time on this because it's just a demo, but I just want something simple. Okay, so there's his other foot. Oh, whoops. And now I'm going to turn this animation back on. And that looks pretty good, but I think these pixels are not necessary. So that looks good. I think maybe I'll just fill this in. Okay. Not bad. Obviously could look better, but this is good enough for what I want to do. So let's go over exporting. So I'm going to save this. I'm using the browser version, so it actually does save it in the browser cache, but that's only in this instance of this browser. So it's not really permanent. Like if you go home and open Piskel, it won't be there. And even if you accidentally clear the cache or you use a different browser on this computer, it won't be there. So when it's cached in the browser, that's useful because I can like reload it and it'll still be there, but it's not permanent in any way. So I need to save it. So I can call it main character or whatever you want to call it, maybe main sprite, because we'll be using it as a sprite in a minute. And then I can save it as a Piskel file. So it says save in browser. That's fine, you can do that. But if I want to be able to, edit it somewhere else or keep it as a file. I need to save a Piskel file. The other thing with Piskel is if you export an image, it's really easy to re-import it. So you won't really lose your work if you have it as an image. But anyway, I'm going to save it as a Piskel file, and it's going to go into my downloads folder right here. And it adds some numbers after it. I guess that's the date. So you could delete those. That's not really important. So I'm just going to delete those. Okay, so I've got my Piskel file in case I need to edit it. Let's organize this a little bit more. So I'm going to go to my documents folder. I have a bunch of crap in here. Let's make a new folder. So I'm going to, on Mac, you can right click and click new folder, or you can hit Command-Shift-N. And I'm going to call this MMP 210. And I'll put all of my classwork in here. So then, if I go back to my downloads, I can just drag this to documents and over here, and I'll put it in there. And I'll make a new folder in here called art, and I'll save all my art for the class in here. I assume you guys know how to use the File Explorer, but if you need any help with the Finder, if you need any help with that, I'm happy to go over it. Obviously, if you're on a PC, this is going to look different. That's fine. It has all the same, it does all the same stuff. But if you want me to look at your setup, I can do that. So yeah, I have my documents folder. I have MMP210. I have my art folder, and there's my Piskel file. And so now I'm going to export a couple different versions of it. We're not going to use all of them in Scratch, but I just kind of want to show the different versions, how they work. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's go back over here. So that was save. Over here, export is really how we're going to get our art out of the art editor and into Scratch. When we go over to Scratch, Scratch does have its own built-in editing tool. So you could make all of your art in Scratch. The reason we're doing it this way is because this is a big part of the process for most development environments. Most of the time, your programming environment does not have built-in art tools. So this is just sort of practice. Okay. In export, we have a few different options. You have a GIF. This is just going to make an animated GIF. This is not going to work in the game context. But if you want to publish it online and have people see the animation, then GIF is what you want to use. What we want to use, so let's download that just as an example. Okay, what we want to use is a PNG, but if we download a PNG over here, it's going to make something called a sprite sheet. A sprite sheet is one image that has every frame on the sprite sheet. This is useful for game engines like Unity or Godot, or Game Maker, but Scratch doesn't have support for this. So let's download it. We'll see what it looks like, but we're not going to use that either. What we are going to use is this third option called zip. If we download a zip, it's going to have each frame of our animation separated into different images. That's going to be the easiest way to get those images into Scratch to create our character. When it comes to preparing your media, not every, there's different solutions for different environments. So different game engines work better with different setups. So this is the setup we're using for Scratch. It's not necessarily the setup that you're always going to use for every game that you create. Okay, so I'm going to download this zip, and that's everything we've got. One last thing I'm going to show is this resolution thing. So right now we have 32 by 32. We can scale this up. And so remember we saw when the image was scaled up, we had those blurred edges because it's the pixel art. That's what most programs will do if the art is being scaled up. If the original file has fewer pixels than how we're displaying it in the game. To avoid that, we make larger versions of the character. But we don't necessarily know how big we want the character to be right now, so we're going to try a couple different versions. So I'm going to scale it up by 2 and download it. And then I'm going to scale it up by 4. So we'll get a couple different ideas of what it might look like. Okay, so I've downloaded a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm gonna put that all in the art folder so it's nice and organized. So another thing I can do in the Finder is if I hit Command N, it'll open a new window, and I can move this window, and so that way I can see my Documents folder and my Downloads folder at the same time. And so I can drag all this stuff in here. And then I've got my 3 zips. So when you download a zip, it instead of downloading each image individually, which would start to clutter up your files, it downloads an archive or a zip file, and that contains all of the images. So if you double click on this, it's actually going to be a little folder. And so we can see the folder. This is the original size, 32 by 32. So I'm going to rename this folder. There's a couple things I could say here. I could say like 32 by 32. I could say 1x, just so I remember what this is, but put some name on it so you know what you're looking at. Okay, let's drag that over here. I'm gonna open this zip, and this one is the 4x, so it's pretty big compared to the first one. So I'm gonna rename this 4x and drag this here. And then this guy is the 2x. So this is kind of in the middle. It's a little bit bigger, but it's not gigantic. So I'm gonna rename this 2x. When I rename the file, what I'm doing is I'm hitting enter. So if you're in the Finder, this doesn't work on Windows, I don't think, but if you're on Mac, if you're in the Finder, you hit enter, it lets you edit that file name. You can also right click on it and just click rename, and then write whatever you want, and then hit enter, and it'll save that name. Okay, so I'm gonna throw that in there. We can delete these zip files. We don't need those anymore. And I'm gonna X out of downloads. Okay, so now I've got my art prepared, and now we're gonna move over to Scratch, and we're gonna look at the interface for a little bit, and then upload our images. I'm gonna stop this recording and start a new one, just so they're into, we have 2 videos. Any questions on any of that stuff? Again, if you haven't done all of these steps, that's okay. You're gonna have time to do them later. It just questions if something was, you didn't understand it, or I went too fast, or anything to clarify. Okay, no questions is not a good sign, but you guys already did this last week, so I'll give you guys the benefit of the doubt. We'll see how it goes after we go to the next one. Okay.